Kenneth Hall, and I was born and raised in Laramie, Wyoming, and I now reside in Cheyenne. I am retired as a computer multimedia technician. And well, my dad had talked to a friend in Laramie that said that the Navy reservists didn't go to Vietnam. So, and this was I graduated high school in '66 to give a timeline there. So then we came over here to Cheyenne, and I joined the Navy Reserve. And after being in the reserve, graduating high school and going to 6 months at the University of Wyoming and dropping out, I decided to go active service in April of that year, which would have been '67 by then. And my first duty station ended up being Da Nang. And then they transferred me up to Caveat, which consisted of 200 of us Navy people and 2,000 Marines. So my mailing address was the 3rd Marine Division, Larks. And Larks went to our little camp of 200 of us Navy guys. Well, my dad wrote congressman and everything, wondering how did they get me in the Marines. So he had a lot harder time when I was in Vietnam than I did, because we used to sit out on our forklifts and watch the napalm being dropped off in the distance. And a bunch of us decided after 6 months we wanted to extend 6 months in Vietnam, because then we could go anywhere in the free world for R&R, with rest and relaxation. So when I wrote my dad about that, he sent me all this stuff, says, you are not safe. And needless to say, we didn't go, but but that was the fun of it, was it? So I never got to go to Australia. Maybe we'll get to do it yet, now that I'm retired, but it was an experience. And I know when I was up at Caveat, we were 3 miles from the DMZ, so artillery would go 10 miles. So we would get a barrage of about 300 artillery rounds dropped in on the Marines next to us, which was just a block away from us. Well, then after 7 months, they discovered the Navy, and they started pounding us on our ramp every half hour. When we had a cement ramp that we would unload Mike or LST ships and load Mike 8 boats to go up to the river to Dong Ha. And so I was having to work that ramp, and every half hour they'd throw in 3 rounds to remind us we were there. And I was fine during the day, but at night I was just shaking from head to toe, and I'd been there seven months, so all I had to stay there in that detachment was 3 months. So I put in my chit, and they had me on a boat down to Da Nang in short order. So, and when I was at Da Nang, I worked a bridge ramp, loading ammunition and whatever that came in on that ramp. And that time we did have 1 rocket attack. And so I, being nervous from having done the bunker thing in Caveat a lot, I ran into an LST ship, and then by the time we came out, when they were all done, the rockets are made out of tin, so it just looked like all sorts of tin laying all over the ramp from blowing up, whereas the artillery is cast iron, so it was a different world for us. But so I just had, in the 4 months I was at Da Nang, I only had to deal with 1 rocket attack, and fortunately I didn't set any ammunition off, because we hauled a lot of ammunition out of LST ships in bridge ramp at Da Nang. So, but it was quite an adventure with towards the end of my stay in, well, first off, I got orders to leave Da Nang, I didn't get orders to leave Da Nang. I had orders when to get in, check into a ship that I was supposed to go to. Well, they left me, and we were supposed to get a month's leave when you leave Vietnam. Well, I went up, he handed me my orders. I said, that's like 3-4 days from now, or no, I said, I have to check into that ship at the end of my tour here, just within 2-3 days. And I said, don't I get a month's leave? So he says, yeah, you're going to leave right now. So I had just like minutes to clear my locker out and get on a plane and get out of there. So that was quite the experience. And most of the time I was there, I drove rough terrain forklifts, or they were a 3-cylinder Pettibone diesel with tires that were probably almost up to my head, 4 tires, and they were four-wheel drive, 4-wheel steering, so you could even turn them in crab where they could curve around, and also they had power forks in and out and everything. And so it was interesting because up at Caveat we had no training on those forklifts, and when I came down to Da Nang, they said we were tearing the forklifts up so bad they finally sent me to training like 2 months before I left Vietnam. So it was interesting. So
your last day there, can you remember that?
My very last day, the darndest thing that I always remember that last day is working on the ramp. There's pallets that get broken open and stuff. So we all love these. They call them Poncho Liners, and they were I can't think what to call that. Camouflage. They were camouflage color, but they were a nice thin nice little blanket. But they were called Poncho Liners, and I had a sea bag full of those, and I wanted to take them home, and I got it. I was just thinking that this morning. So when we went up, we were getting ready to get on the plane or do our luggage and stuff, and one of them announced, somebody announced that it's not legal to take lots of this military equipment home in a separate bag, and we will be searching your sea bags. Well, they didn't search our sea bags, but I got rid of I left my bag of Poncho Liners off the side, and I still to this day I'd love to have a bag of Poncho Liners, but that's the way it works. And now somebody else probably got a sea bag full of Poncho Liners back to the United States. But and it was interesting when we got on the plane. It was Continental Airlines. We're flying Continental Airlines, and when I got on that plane, well, we were like typical soldiers or sailors. We had a lot of foul language in our conversations. And here's stewardess, and it was always, you could just tell everybody was trying to shut down their language and quit saying all the nasty words. And also when I left for Vietnam was an interesting thing. We were out in Los Angeles, and we got on the plane, and we actually dropped off at Okinawa and then went over to Da Nang. But anyway, we got going down the runway, and all of a sudden the plane started vibrating. My oxygen mask dropped, and finally when I got the plane to a stop, we got out of the plane, and all the tires were just like little bands of rubber. And I don't know what happened, but they got her stopped. And the darndest thing was, Continental put us up in their employee lounge there in the Los Angeles airport, and 4 or 5 hours later, they got all new tires on, because they didn't have another plane. You think big old Los Angeles, they'd have another plane. But anyway, they put the new tires, and of course my oxygen, I was sitting in the same place, and my oxygen, all the oxygen got, I think 2-3 of the oxygens just fell from vibration. And anyway, that's the plane we took on to Da Nang.
With new tires.
With new tires, and I mean, it was, so first I thought, well, maybe they know maybe I'm not supposed to go. But
your dad was trying to convince you to go into the Navy Reserve?
Yeah, the Navy Reserve. And so I joined over in Cheyenne because I lived in Laramie. I graduated high school in Laramie. And so, yeah, and and it was just amazing. It was, and I ran into some other reservists in the Navy, but in the Vietnam on ground, but
And the thought behind that was that you would be safer if you were in
right.
the reserves.
If I wouldn't be in Vietnam. I mean, that's what, and especially young. I mean, I think you figure, well, worst came to worst, he'd be on a ship, out in the water, but. No. So I always think to myself, well, God has a heck of a sense of humor, You think you're going to get out of something,
And you wonder what your dad was thinking when he found out that that's where you were actually stationed.
oh, well, it was so interesting. Once I got up to the Caveat, and our mailing address was 3rd Marine Division, Larks, and he started writing congressmen and everything. How can they move this guy out of the Navy into the Marines? But with just 200 of us there, and and that's I learned just recently. I was looking through some of my old memorabilia. We were there to support the 3rd Marine Division. So that's we had one whole hooch, they called them, the plywood buildings that we were in, and that was full of Seabees that did the construction work for the Navy. And I was in the shipping and receiving into that, and plus I was a mess cook for a while in our chow hall, and that's part of the experience. My 7 months before I left, our chow hall got hit with artillery, and so we had to eat sea rations for a week. That was tough, but the poor old Marines, they were a block away from us. Their chow hall was a tent. Ours was, all our buildings, our sleeping quarters were plywood buildings that they called hooches, that were built up on stilts, because normally in the rainy season there's a lot of water there, and I was just happened to be there an unusual dry year in 68, so didn't get the monsoon they normally do. But anyway, they had a metal building. Well, it looks like a trailer house. They were hauled in with cranes. They didn't have wheels, but they were built like a trailer house. So our chow hall, our kitchen with a bakery, that was all a building. Our laundry was another trailer house type building, and our showers and bathrooms of that. So we were in luxury, because the poor Marines, they were all in tents, and they had to take a shower with a container. I think they just left it in the sun to get warm up. So, and their beer, we had refrigerator even in our hooch. I don't know how that happened, but they had one. And so we had a little bar built, and they give us we could buy a case of beer a week. So, and so could the Marines, but they had to drink theirs warm. So we had Marines we got to know pretty well, because they were coming down and they would swap warm, beer for cold beer. So it was fun. It was a fun time. And I know some Vietnam veterans, when I first got home, some of the atrocities they dealt with, they had real scars, and just hard to get anybody to talk about it. And I was probably one of the rare ones that really talked a lot about it. But we did have in Caveat, we were issued, and we all wore green uniforms, like the Army and the Navy, or the Air Force, or Marines. But where was I going with that? But the other interesting thing that I had when I was at the Caveat, we all wore the green khaki, same uniform, or everybody. And of course our officers, they wear the same thing, and they just have just metal. There's nothing to make them stand out. But when I was in Caveat, we had I had an M16 rifle assigned to me. I had a flak jacket, and a helmet, and we had bunkers, sandbag bumpers that we'd run into when there's artillery coming in. And the other thing I was telling my wife when we were looking at this Huey helicopter out in front, I actually, one time, I think there was just 2-3 of us just standing around looking at this Huey helicopter, and the guy asked us, and this is a Caveat, he asked us, well, do you want to we'll give you a little ride above the camp. And of course, here is a guy hanging on one side with a 50 caliber machine gun, and one on the other side. And we buzzed around. And it's really nice. Well, when we came back, there must have been 100 guys standing there wanting to ride. And they says, "Oh no, no, that's all we can do." And that's just kind of a blessing. You end up, one was right there at the right time, and it worked, you know. So.
And you didn't get
But,
shut down.
right, and